We'd driven up to the start of my road. In the distance, black smoke from Billy's burning house was building above the tree line. Liza told me to pull the truck off to the side behind some trees. Then we climbed out, and she told Wally to go scout up top and that we'd wait for him in the woods on the other side of the road. Wally grabbed his tomahawk and took off through the woods and up the mountain. I reckon he didn't want nothing slowing him down because he took the scope and left his rifle behind with Liza. I took my dad's rifle out from behind the seats, and we headed off across the road. We went a few feet back and crouched behind some trees. The smoke was still building. We figured it was only a matter of time before we'd be hearing the volunteers racing on with their sirens wailing. "How do you know so much?" I asked Liza. "About what?" "Everything. The Mundys, the mayor?" Liza was quiet for a moment as she looked out to the road. "I had an older brother," she began. "He was a half-brother. We had different fathers. When he was 8 and I was 3, my mother gave him to the Mundys." She paused. I could tell her mind was searching some distant memory. 12 years later, he returned. For a while, he didn't talk. He barely even moved. But one day, he woke up and told me everything. "Like what?" "Well, I'm sure you saw a lot of it yourself. The cages, the cannibalism, the executions, the Wendigo. But he also told me about the Mundys and how they would kill each other, especially if they got a sense that a certain Mundy's loyalty was waning. That's why we need to hurry up and get my mom." "Yup." "Do Mundys really not have to pay the fee?" "Yeah, that part is true. If you're a Mundy, it's free to live here. It costs 2 of your own blood to leave." "Why is that?" "To convince you to stay, I guess." "You said nobody is protected. Even other families that give up their own children?" Liza turned to look at me. She seemed frustrated. "Mason, never trust the word of evil. Everything they say and do is for their own benefit. They promise protection so that those people become more loyal to them, but the Mundys are only loyal to the mayor. If they decide that somebody they promised protection to needs to die, then they won't hesitate to kill them." It seemed so obvious now that I'd heard it. I guess it's just human nature to trust someone. Just because police enforce the laws, it don't mean they won't break them. Athletes cheat despite there being rules. Married couples have affairs even though they vowed to be faithful. Some of it's broken word. Some of it's hypocrisy. But if you ask me, hypocrisy is just the breaking of an unspoken promise. A promise ain't nothing but a moment you can look back on and realize you'd been fooled. "What happened to your brother?" I asked. Liza turned her gaze back to the road. "He killed himself soon after." Wally came creeping up about 20 minutes later. Said he'd seen an old lady, 3 deformed fellas, 2 of the ugliest women he'd ever laid eyes on, and a man in a police uniform. But no sign of my mom. "Well, I guess Chief Collins is up there," I said. "He'll be armed." Liza looked over to Wally. "And you take him out first." Wally nodded. Liza turned back to me. "Mason, you and I are going to drive your truck up there. We're going to talk to them first. They want me. so we'll act as if I'm giving myself up. When I give the signal, Wally takes out Collins and whichever of those inbred fuckers he can. Mason, you're going to grab the rifle from the truck, so make sure it's somewhere you can grab it quickly. I'll have my revolver on me. The Mundys can take a lot of damage. Dad shot one several times, and the fucker never died. They can die. Just make sure to aim for their heads. Liza stood up and told Wally to head back up the mountain and find a spot. Then, she stopped him. Oh, and one more thing. Leave the old lady alive. The sun was setting as we pulled up to the Mundy property. In the distance, we could finally hear the sirens heading towards the fire. All the Mundys, and Collins with his pistol in hand, came outside. Liza and I got out of the truck. I reckon y'all are the ones that caused the fire over yonder, said Collins. Yep, said Liza. Collins looked over at me. I had a feeling that dumbass uncle of yours would fuck up. He got what was coming to him, I said. I suppose you think we'll get ours too? I gritted my teeth and didn't respond. I so badly wanted to shoot him right then. I'm turning myself in, said Liza. Me for his mother. Collins laughed. You expect us to believe that? I mean, look! He pointed at the black plume of smoke off in the distance. That ain't the doings of a woman planning to give herself up. I did that, I interrupted. I trusted Billy, and he betrayed me. I was angry. Collins looked over at me and began playing with his mustache. Fine. Liza, stand there and let me search you for weapons. Where's his mother? Collins stopped. You gonna let me search you first? Show us his mother. Collins turned and looked at Sarah and chuckled. I told you, didn't I? He quickly swung back around with his pistol aimed at the ready. I heard the shot before I saw the impact. A distant rifle had opened up Collins' head. He hit the ground, dead as a doornail. Sarah's eyes darted to our dead kin and then back to me. She let out the soul-piercing scream and ordered to attack. Liza had pulled the revolver that had been tucked behind her lower back and was firing shots at the charging Mundys. I could hear the echo of Wally's rifle in the distance as I dove into the truck to grab mine. I swung around, and the younger Mundy was nearly on me. Suddenly, his head snapped to the side, and he went down. I quickly looked over to my right, and I could see the glint from Wally's rifle in a tree atop the mountain's highest point. Liza had ducked back into the truck to reload, but we weren't dealing with other shooters, so cover didn't matter. 3 of the Mundys were already dead, the younger one and the 2 women, as well as Collins. Bubba and the other male Mundy were still alive. Sarah was still screaming. She'd occasionally stop to take a breath and then keep going. It was a loud scream. Louder than you'd expect from an old woman. But it wasn't inhuman. I suppose it was her way of communicating with them inbreds. The 2 remaining Mundys were charging us. Bubba was sprinting at me and the other at Liza, who was still busy loading the revolver. I turned and fired at the Mundy charging her. The first shot hit him in the chest and barely slowed him down. Then the second one hit his head. He fell to the dirt and slid to a stop. A second later, Bubba collided with me. He was on top of me, But instead of trying to hold me down like last time, he was like a rabid animal trying to tear me to shreds. I had the rifle along my chest, trying to keep him off of me. He was making incoherent noises and salivating. I was pushing with every bit of strength I had in me, but he was stronger. Sarah was still screaming. Then suddenly she stopped and yelled, "Bubba!" with genuine panic in her voice. A shot exploded into his head, raining blood and matter as he fell limp on top of me. Liza had gotten him point blank with the revolver. Sarah was now crying with anguish. I pushed Bubba off me, and Liza helped me to my feet. We'd crossed over to Sarah, who was now more emotional than I'd thought possible. "Where's my mom?" "Kill me," Sarah replied. "We'll do worse than that," said Liza. "Now tell us where she is." Sarah didn't respond. She just sat there sobbing. Wally appeared out of the woods and joined us. "Make her speak, Wally," said Liza. He hung his rifle over his shoulder and pulled out his tomahawk. He grabbed Sarah by her long, greasy hair. She flailed around, screaming for him to let her go. He threw her back to the ground, stepped on her arm, and without hesitation, cut off her hand. She cried out in agony. "Where is she?" he calmly asked. Sarah kept crying. He put his boot on her other arm and brought the tomahawk's blade down on her wrist, severing her remaining hand. Sarah cried out louder, but still didn't say anything. Wally stepped back and pressed onto her leg. Her face was panic-stricken as she watched. He gave her a moment to speak, and then lifted his tomahawk. "She's with the mare!" she finally confessed. Wally relaxed. Liza moved up to her. "Is she alive?" Sarah's crying began to morph into laughter. Wally brought the tomahawk down onto her ankle. Her laughter returned to wailing again, but only for a moment. She was back to laughing. "Yum yum," she said with a panicked chuckle. She was rubbing her belly with her bloody nubs. "Tasty mommy." She kept laughing. Wally and Liza glanced at each other with concern. I couldn't stand it anymore. I stepped past Wally, put the rifle to Sarah's head, and silenced her laughter for good. I went into the house and over to the padlocked door. Liza followed after me. "Mason, wait. Don't go in there yet." I brought the butt of the rifle down on the padlock a couple of times and broke it off. "Mason!" I stepped through the door and began descending into the cavern.